Hi, everyone. You are at the Senate Bill 671 work group meeting. We're still waiting for some folks to log on, so please sit tight while we help people log on. Thanks.
Trey, let's go ahead and get started because we have a full meeting, so I can start us.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay. So good morning. My name is Hannah Walter, and I'm the program manager for the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program at the California Transportation Commission. The commission is also leading the Senate Bill 671 work, and so we really appreciate all of you being with us today. The first thing that we're going to do is go over some of the remaining corridor recommendations. And so I'll walk through those, and then we're going to have some really interesting presentations. I'm excited to hear from these folks. So we have the Port of Long Beach and their charging study. We have a potential methodology for prioritizing hydrogen station locations, and that's from the California Fuel Cell Partnership. And then some initial hydrogen charging station like cost estimates and things like that. And the Gualco group is going to share those. So I think it's really good information, and we'll start walking through it. So in terms of the corridor recommendations, can you go to the next slide? And you can keep going. One more. Oh, I forgot. Okay, one thing I wanted to go over with this group and just get your thoughts on really quick is I'll have a better idea of this once I get information from you all on the questions that I sent around earlier, and that's due the end of March. But I'm sure you're probably working on it or planning to. But one thing I was thinking is that it might be good in the assessment to try to highlight projects that would serve as examples of recommended solutions. So for example, I think the Port of Long Beach is going to talk about just the need for public charging for truck owners who are more like independent operators and don't have their own private fleet hub. So I was thinking, like, in the report, we should try to see if there's a project we could put together that people would be willing to work on if they had funding of some kind of truck hub where trucks could charge even if they didn't have a home base overnight, whether that's part of a private hub that they just have public spots available or it's all public. I don't know, but I was just, that's one example. I heard one presentation about truck as a service. So the one company would own both the trucks and the station. That's also in a World Economic Forum paper I read. So that's an interesting idea that we might want to highlight. Rest areas, I'm not saying that I want to work with everyone, so I don't want to do something that people have major concerns with. But if there was a way that we could get to yes in terms of using these locations without causing, some significant concerns, that might be a potential option. Maybe not, but it's just an idea. And any maybe example partnerships between leasers and fleets, or any ideas people have for how to de-risk their investments and how to ensure demand. So, and then I'm going to try to work with the energy programs on infrastructure. So just to make sure that when we're selecting projects for the assessment, we can try to work with the utility companies who are part of our work group as much as possible. But those are just some ideas I had, thinking that we might want to be intentional about some of the projects that we highlight. But I'm curious to hear the work group's thoughts on that. What do you all think about that?
So Hannah, we do have a question already. There's a question from Nick Chiap, and he writes, I've received feedback from Caltrans that there's issues with retrofitting or expanding rest areas due to federal jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's true. There's a whole, there's a lot of, there's a lot of, that's a whole subject matter area. I'm not sure if we should spend too much time talking about that today, but I will just say that right now you're not allowed to, there's restrictions like what you just mentioned, and there's also restrictions against charging people. So if we wanted to, and so the good thing about rest stops is that there's space there. So, you know, and people are used to stopping there. But the difficulty is that you would need to charge people in order to make money to maintain the station. And there's, you know, it could be seen as that's not something that there's been a general consensus around trying to change. Because, but, you know, one thing is if we could find a way to do a partnership between public and private that was beneficial enough for both parties, then that might, you know, might work. But it might be something that we can't tackle in this report. I don't want to say too much more because I feel like that will just open up a whole other discussion. So maybe we can talk about that more later. Nick, just email me if you want to talk more about that.
And so before we move a little bit further, I just want to go over a couple of logistics since we had transitioned to the GoToWebinar format. So, so everybody, there are two options for providing feedback. That was an example of using the questions tab. So when you look at your panel on the right-hand side, basically it says questions and there's a drop-down you could select. Just go ahead and type in your question in the box and CTC staff will read it out loud to the rest of the work group. The other option is to, if you look at your attendees tab, you can raise your hand. It looks like there's a hand icon there, and just click on that, and then it'll alert us that you want to make a comment verbally or just kind of, yeah, verbalize a question. And we'll keep our eyes out for that and at the appropriate time, unmute you. Okay. And I don't see any more questions, Hannah, so let me know if you want to move forward.
Okay. Yeah, we can move forward, and thanks for saying that. I forgot to do that at the beginning. Okay, so let's look at the corridor recommendations. This is a set of recommendations from SCAG, so the Southern California Council of Governments. This one slide is highlighting all of the routes that they recommended, so that's more like an overview of everything. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so the coastal north-south corridor is I-5 from San Diego County border to the Kern County border. Next slide. And then the inland north-south corridor is I-15 from San Diego County border to Nevada border. The 215 from the I-15 southern connection to the I-15 northern connection. Next slide. And then the Port of Hueneme to Central Coast and Coastal North-South Corridor. That's a few different ones. So it's Highway 101, State Route 118, State Route 126, and there's a couple direct access routes in there. But it's might be easier to just look at the map. It's a good visual. Okay, and then the San Pedro Bay ports to the Inland Empire corridor. That includes quite a few highways too. So it's I-710 from State Route 47 to I-10. It's the 110 from 47 to 91. 47 from I-10 to 710. So 605, the 91, the 60, the 10, and the 210. So that's just a lot of the routes that are connecting the ports to different industrial zones and then moving through a bit. So that concludes SCAG's recommended corridors. I don't know if someone wants to say something about those from SCAG, Scott, or
Let's see. I I'm gonna check the hands raised. Looks like Edward Phillips has a hand raised. Edward, I'm gonna unmute you.
Thanks. So I had a comment about the slide that you asked about, Hannah, but it actually ties back into the corridors. So with a couple of those concerns you had, I think you need to, or we need to think about how to solve those by using a couple of them together. And this ties to the corridors. So we know that approximately 60 to 7% of the medium and heavy duty trucks do not return to a depot, and they travel along these corridors, and where they're fueling now is primarily at truck stops. And so when you talk about where they're going to charge and the need to either provide that service as for a fee, most likely that's going to be at a truck stop. And then you tie that into how do you de-risk the investment? Well, that's pretty simple. It needs to be completely subsidized. No public, no privately owned, publicly available truck stop is going to make the investment in billions of dollars if there isn't a customer demand. And then where they need to be located is along these corridors. So asking the question about what problem we're trying to solve, we're not worried about the private fleets that are bound to a depot or return to a depot, because they're going to be able to put charging into their depot, just like we do at BNSF. It's the public trucks, excuse me, the trucks that are not returning to a depot. The small owner doesn't have the resources, and the infrastructure already exists in terms of location. Now we have to probably work around some of the issues like real estate and the availability of real estate given the penalty for charging. But we also don't know for a fact if it's all going to be battery electric or if it's going to be hydrogen fuel cell, which goes back to the initial question that no one's been able to answer yet, which is how much energy is the state going to need to decarbonize the economy? But going back to that one slide and tying into the corridors, I think we can frame the question in, we're trying to solve for the small fleets that don't return to a depot. What infrastructure already exists? Does it exist along the corridors? And then how to incentivize it through grants.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And you covered a lot of points there, but I have a couple of thoughts. Okay, so first, I agree with you that I think especially initially, public subsidy is a must in order to de-risk, the investment in order to make it possible. So I fully support that, but I want the report to look a little beyond that, because it's fine to have 100% or 80% or 50% public funds funding these projects at the beginning, but we can't sustain that in perpetuity. So I just want to think about at least based on what we know now, what is our best guess for, or idea for how business is going to make a profit on this long term and be able to sustain themselves. What kind of business models do we want? And that's, I guess, a secondary piece that I'm trying to get at. I think absolutely we will have to recommend a significant amount of public investment in these, especially initial stations. But also I want to lay the groundwork for moving forward. What do we think is going to be, what's going to be good business, I guess.
Yeah, and the truck stop owners, they're going to sell whatever their customers want them to sell in terms of fuel. So right now it's diesel, the medium and heavy duty class of trucks. When the fleets materialize that want charging or hydrogen, then they will invest in that. But it's a chicken and egg conversation, because if you have zero emission battery electric trucks or hydrogen fuel cell trucks and you can't get fuel or charging, then those become stranded assets. So the grants would be useful in the first maybe 3 to 5 years, maybe 10 years, to allow the truck stop owners to install that type of infrastructure without risking no return, because they won't have a return in the first several years because there won't be enough trucks. And you have to do it that way. You have to have the infrastructure available before you have the trucks, because if you do it the other way, the way CARB is thinking about doing it, which is to mandate the trucks before they
Right.
guarantee infrastructure, those trucks are going to be stranded. They're going to be very expensive paperweights. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Eventually, the market will start to meet the demand, and the private fueling station owners will be able to invest with confidence that they're going to get a return on that investment, but not initially, not in the first several years, whether that's 3, 5, 10, I don't know. And that's why I think it's important to talk to the fuel station owners, because they're going to be able to have that information on how long their investment, their IRR needs to be and all that stuff. But it has to be, the infrastructure's first to meet the trucks that are mandated. And then once the market catches up, then the subsidies can be reduced.
Okay, that makes sense. And I agree, we need the infrastructure first as much as possible to avoid stranded investments. And we do have meetings set up with some of those station owners so we will ask them that. That's a good point, but I agree with what you're saying. And that actually leads me to the thing you said about the type of projects. And I guess just thinking through, so this isn't, well, so what I was thinking was that we would need like at least 2 types of projects in the report. But again, I don't know the answers. I'm looking for you guys to educate me. So I fully admit that this is just an idea. This could be wrong. So you guys let me know what you think. You're the experts, not me here. But I'm just thinking that for long haul, or people going that are going to be, like you said, leaving a home base and not necessarily returning, but just keeping going, it kind of seems like in the long term anyway, hydrogen is likely the better option because it's so close to diesel and lighter and doesn't need the charging time. But so that's like one type of project. For the types of projects that are kind of either last mile or they're going out and coming back, to the same home base every day, then to me, it makes sense for those to be electric because they can charge overnight and they don't necessarily need the fast charging and stuff. But I thought there was some truck use cases where it wasn't like a private fleet truck that was like operating like that, but it was a small independent operator. And maybe the Port of Long Beach can talk more about this in their presentation, but it seems like in those cases, they might need like some kind of public charging hub.
Yeah, and so we have a couple of questions on this SCAG slide.
Oh, sure.
One is from Nancy Pfeiffer, and her question is, did SCAG indicate any priority?
I have to go back and look at their form now, actually. I don't remember that. I don't think so, but maybe they did. Is Scott or Annie on this call?
Scott, yes, actually he has his hand raised. So Scott Strelecki, I'm gonna unmute you. Scott, you're free to speak.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so to answer that question first, no, we talked about priorities and to give some context. So maybe I'll just kind of say my comment and I'll probably address the question. So basically, I just wanted to briefly say thanks again for CTC staff for giving us some extra time to work with our regional partners and go through the process that we need to go through is very helpful, and we appreciate that. So to that point, clearly we work with all of our county transportation commissions, the ports, all throughout the different counties, et cetera, and all kind of our, key goods movement stakeholders as part of the process. So it was collectively, trying to take some of the tools, resources that SCAG has, some of the analytics, warehousing, volumes on corridors, all those sort of things, CTC staff kind of looking at similar metrics, et cetera, and trying to, look at what the key balance is here and what makes sense from a corridor perspective. So that's kind of, the high level of the approach to getting to these corridors. There is no You know, when we think of the priorities, I mean, the first slide, these are the corridors for the SCAG region, right? That we are recommending. So we're not per se at this point, you know, saying, you know, any of them are being evaluated against each other. These are just collectively the corridors for the SCAG region for the process that we were asked to address. So that's the answer to the question. And then the other thing I just wanted to say is that, you know, from a goods movement system perspective, you know, that's how SCAG, when we do our long range plans, when we do our studies, et cetera, the system component is just highly important. And, you know, even though we have one map showing all the corridors, then we kind of deconstruct them into their kind of collective corridors, you know, the flows of goods, the complexity of supply chains, intermediary moves, et cetera, you know, all these things kind of fit together. So, you know, the warehouse relationships, the landside relationships, you know, all the major facilities, et cetera, you know, that's why this region is so important. You know, we just have this global supply chain, strong connection, and, you know, a vast amount of complex moves and flows as a result of that. So again, thanks for the opportunity, Hannah.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Cherry, how are we looking on our questions and hands?
So we actually have a hand raised from Eric Cahill. Eric, I am going to unmute you. Let's see. It looks like Eric. Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Yeah, you unmuted me, and then I had to unmute me. So thank you. I just wanted to address, and I didn't catch the first gentleman's name who was commenting about the need for subsidies and the issue of de-risking. I just wanted to, first of all, completely agree with that statement. And it's absolutely, it's really not a question of whether it's the trucks or the stations that should come first. Getting the operators to buy trucks, the first question they have for us utilities is, do we have the fueling, the charging infrastructure to support? And we got to have that in place. Frankly, we got to be able to address that. That's the reality of the market. Is these fleets, their number one pain point is number one, the duty cycle of the electric alternative, whether that's a battery electric or hydrogen. Can it meet my duty cycle? And then number two is the cost, and it's not just the cost of the vehicles; it's the cost of the charging or fueling infrastructure that would need to go in to support that. And so that's the reason, a couple key reasons why it's such a major hurdle. You have to address the infrastructure question first, and then the trucks come. And to, again, the earlier gentleman's point is, there isn't a business model. These are extremely expensive. You're talking, it's one thing to have a gas station serving light duty vehicles, but it's very much another when you're talking these large, truck fueling or charging plazas that are going to be needed to support not just, and this addresses Hannah's question, about whether you do hydrogen versus electric or both or whatever. The truth is, whether it's long haul traffic, yes, there you've got to address that. And granted, at least in the near term, hydrogen may seem like a better solution in that case for the reasons that were raised, like weight, payload trade-offs, and things like cost trade-offs. But the truth is, we don't have a crystal ball, right? So we don't know what's going to happen, say 5-10 years from now, with regard to battery electric technology, and with regard to the pace at which that scales with hydrogen, on pace with hydrogen technology. So we kind of have to do a little of both, right, to make sure that it's ready. And then secondly, regardless of whether we're talking, trying to just think in terms of long haul, you've also got a significant use case in these regions of independent operators who don't have depots to refuel or recharge at. And they need that public fueling, public charging footprint there to get that job done if you want to reach and penetrate into those fleets, get uptake into those fleets as well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And
I would share too, with the worry over stranded assets.
yeah,
We've done some modeling ourselves here at SMUD. Where you can you could at least come up with a case where you know putting or subsidizing some number of stations out there is really low risk, right? To you as the subsidizing entity of it being a stranded asset, because ultimately there's some point at which the business model for the private sector starts to come into play and starts to take up that slack. And in the meantime, once that happens, then you're well above any concern about stranded asset, right? You're going to have, you say your region required, I don't know, let's just say, just to take a nice round number, say it required 100 fueling plazas. But when we start talking about charging, well, you don't need as many because a lot of them have their own depots and they can do it, right? So you have to make some rough guesstimates. So then you say, okay, no, let's just say half. There's 50 of those, right? So then you can say, well, if we take the first step and subsidize, say, just 10% of those, the first 5 charging plazas, then the risk of the market collapsing to the degree that you're now at risk of those 5 not going anywhere is very limited, is very minimal. So in other words, the lower the number, the less the stranded risk. So there's going to be some optimal point in there where you could subsidize the first 5, the first 10, whatever it takes to then get that private sector, to get enough trucks on the road where the private sector can then start to have a business model that makes a viable business case for them to essentially take over that responsibility, if you will.
yeah, no, that makes sense. And actually, I probably wasn't like clear enough when I said stranded investments, because I actually wasn't thinking of public funds when I said that. I meant like what's gonna attract private investors to want to put these in, like, because they are facing the same question, because they don't know if they're thinking about, because I've been trying to think, where could collaborations be the most helpful? Where can we encourage private industry to make these things happen? But it seems like they're struggling with the same issues. Like, if they put money into building something, how do they know it's going to get used, especially if it's some kind of public-private partnership? So I guess that's more what I meant. But I hear what you're saying, and I agree that we should have, I don't know if this is going to be possible based on my understanding of the CARB regulations, but it seems like we should have infrastructure first. So I'm hoping to work with everyone to try to get that on track and have those things being built as quickly as possible. And I know like Caltrans is working with to try to use some of the federal funding for zero emissions to do the same type of thing. So yeah, I recognize that I'm not as I am concerned, of course, as a public steward about the public funding, but I was more thinking of that in just incentivizing private sector involvement and things like that. But I appreciate your guys' comments. Let's keep going if possible, because I want to make sure that our presenters have time. Okay, so then I forgot, and I'm sorry, Sandag staff, to put this in last time. This was in one of Sandag's corridor recommendations that I should have presented in the last meeting. So we have State Route 7, 98, 111, 78, and 86. And then they also have a rail line included in there, a Union Pacific look. And then for Gateway Cog, they have nominated the 710, the route that is along SR 91, 605, and 405, and then I-5. And I'm just going to let you read some of the specifics on the slide, but we appreciate those nominations, and we're going to try to work to present the corridor recommendations in a way that shows where there's a lot of overlap in the nominations, and also just highlights the importance of, I think all the corridors people have recommended are important for freight. So let me think about the best way to show that in the report. And as we get closer, I'll work with you all on that too, so that you guys have your input. But this helps let all of us know what you guys are thinking. And so we really appreciate your corridor nominations. Unless there's any questions on those, then I'll let Matt start talking about the charging study.
So Hannah, Aravind Kailas has his hand raised. Aravind, I'm going to unmute you. Aravind, you're self-muted. Aravind, you had your hand raised. I'm
yes,
trying to.
I was able to. Okay, got it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to ask the question, and thanks again for bringing us all together. I just wanted to echo what Eddie said earlier and what Eric said. Just another point that I wanted to put on the table for consideration is there's many proposals, many charging corridors, but I think we're looking at two possibilities. One is just putting chargers along all these corridors, something that we don't want to do. It's probably an overkill. And on the other hand is to do nothing. But we also see that there's electric trucks, Class 8 electric trucks that are being put on the road today, Class 6, Class 7 electric trucks. This is happening in the Golden State in certain regions. So I would encourage this group to consider both and kind of see where the private investments are happening, where the need is the largest, and where are the deployments happening today. Because strategically rolling out those 4 or 5 plazas that Eric was talking about in regions where these early adopters could sort of maximize their investments, they could bring in the utilization. Furthermore, that would then be sort of the impetus to bring on the independent owner operators who probably don't have access to charging where their trucks are domiciled. So just something at a strategic level for consideration, which I'm sure you are. And the only other thing that I would say is for any such endeavor that is funded, let's just make sure we also bring in the workforce development piece, because we want these chargers to be working 100% of the time. And based on our own early deployments, and as this has been raised in many other forums, uptime is just not there today with today's deployment. So this is a growing area, nascent technology. So I would encourage that component to be considered with a lot of weight in terms of making sure that the charger uptime is there and we have access to the repair services. Again, thanks again. This is Arvind Kailas with the Volvo Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvind, and thank you everyone who's commented. I'm trying to make notes of what you guys are saying, and I find it really helpful. And that's a really good point about location, just looking at where the first trucks will be deployed. So we will do that. And I'd read the CARB Advanced Clean Fleets rule, but we'll keep looking into that and see, maybe we can like map that out, or try to just get a good handle on where those areas in the state are, so that we can recognize that or take that into account when we're planning for the infrastructure. And the workforce development part, that is also a good point. And if anyone has any ideas about contacts for workforce, Arvind, I don't know if you have contacts, but if you do, just email them to me. Or if you are on this call and you are the person, then reach out to me, because I haven't actually met with the workforce side of things yet, but I agree that it is going to be a critical component. So we still need to do work on that, but you're right, it's important. That's an important part.
Thank you for acknowledging my comments. I'm happy to sort of be your point of contact, and I'll send you a separate note.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sherry, are we okay to go to the Port of Long Beach study?
I think we're okay to move forward. I think the rest of the questions, they're kind of general in nature and we're responding to them. And there are no hands raised at the moment.
Okay, perfect, thanks. So Matt Arms is with the Port of Long Beach, and I'll let him introduce himself so that he can start his presentation. Thanks, Matt.
Matt, you're
Okay.
ready. You're available.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Hannah. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us here to give a summary of our fueling assessment that we recently did to look at public charging and hydrogen fueling opportunities within the port. Just a couple of things before I get going. This is going to be a pretty quick, very high level overview of the assessment. I encourage you, if you're interested, to go to POLB, that's POLB.com, that's Port of Long Beach. And under the environment and zero emission tabs, you can download the study. I also want to thank Renee Moylanen and Charlie Botsford, who are also on the call, who can help answer any difficult questions, who led the effort to do the assessment. And then so the final thing, just kind of why we did this assessment. You know, at the Port of Long Beach, and I think it's probably generally understood, we don't think that the majority or even a really large significant portion of the charging and fueling that's going to be required for zero emissions will happen in the ports. There's just logistical, land availability. There's a lot of reasons why that just doesn't make sense. But we did, especially in these early stages when we need to jumpstart some of this, we wanted to look and see what opportunities there could be in the Port of Long Beach for public charging and hydrogen fueling, and see what that might look like, and what a framework for asking those questions for sites in the Port of Long Beach might look like. So that's really what the assessment did. Next slide. And just as a reminder, this is an assessment that is a technical assessment only. It does not represent policies, commitments, or potential projects in the port. It's just a snapshot in time of what assets might look like and what a framework, again, for locating sites might be. As we know, technology is changing very rapidly, and land use dynamics and land availability within the ports is constantly changing. And then finally, this is really only one aspect of our comprehensive clean truck strategy. Next slide. So here, and I won't go through all of these, but you can see what the study looked at. It was everything from how much public infrastructure do we need, what potential different charging scenarios and layouts might look like in the port, and it looked at how the kind of the business case, what are the costs and what are the potential business plans for it, and then where it would go, what potential sites we might have available. And then we also looked at some potential grid impacts. Next slide. For this study, we define public fueling as charging outlets or fueling stations that anyone can use. And so it's open to the public. That doesn't mean that there may not be fees or other restrictions or access restrictions, such as time of use or days of use. And we aren't including those sites that are owned or operated by a private company or a fleet for their use. We do recognize that going forward, some fleets may make their some charging available for the public, and we encourage that, but that was not considered public charging for the purposes of this study. Next slide. So kind of getting down to the to the kind of conclusions right away. So what what does charging look like, especially in the very near term, and what it could look like in the port. So we have kind of two categories. We have the opportunity charging, which we were looking at those 20 to 60 minute charges to top off a truck when they are either between loads or waiting, or they just need to get a top off. And that would be need fast charging, 500 kW plus. And it would also, site considerations include things such as opportunity charging would probably require layouts that accommodate both the bobtail and a 40-foot chassis. And so that really has site configuration challenges or differences. Whereas overnight charging in our assessment was kind of the traditional, what you would think of probably at a fleet, where the tractor is parked overnight or between shifts. They have 8 to 10 hours to charge. Slow charging, so 50 to 150 kW would be probably adequate, and they wouldn't necessarily need room for the chassis. It would probably just be the bobtail. Next slide. So this slide shows what, for the assessment, we thought would be the very near term the anticipated need for charging. So we're assuming for port drayage that there would need to be 16,000, just over 16,000 zero emission trucks. We are following some numbers put out by CARB about that being a 10% fuel cell split and 90% battery electric. We know that this number is often discussed, and so it will change over time as fleets are deployed, but in the very near term, from what we're seeing, we think this is probably a good assumption for our study. And then so you can see then what we would need by 2035 in terms of fueling and charging. And again, that for us in the port area, that means we could need up to 420 to 1,300 public charging units near the port. The study looked at hydrogen supply and found in the very near term that was probably sufficient. And by sufficient, I don't mean that right now we could go out and fuel 1,600 trucks, but that it was not the area that needed the focus in terms of fast tracking the infrastructure. Next slide. So key findings of the study. So like I said, that we found, at least in our area, in the very near term, we need to focus on electric charging infrastructure, that overnight charging is better in the near term, and for a couple of reasons. One, that is what the technology we have today, 150 kW, and that's what the charge on both the charging and the truck side are those shorter terms. It also allows for, and if it's public charging overnight, it allows for what Hannah mentioned earlier, potentially providing overnight charging opportunities in the near term to smaller fleets or independent owner operators that don't have the big facility to go back to and charge. What we found is there are many different business models, and we talked about that earlier on this call too, that for public charging, and we explore some of those in the assessment, but we also identify that creative business models are going to need to be are going to need to be further developed. And one of the main conclusions is and this has been talked about this morning as well, is right now the business case is not good for public charging. That doesn't mean we shouldn't move forward, but it means that in the near term, we are going to need public subsidy and investment and creative business models in order to move public charging forward. Next slide. So kind of the major conclusions is that, again, in the near term, it's reasonable. We think it's reasonable to minimize investments in opportunity charging and focus on that overnight charging for public charging. And that we really need to look in the case for improving the business case, including funding, advocating for funding, future-proofing designs, and one of the biggest things we need to do is we need to start, which is why we're all here today, planning now, because this infrastructure takes a long time to put in. So I think that was my last slide. Next slide. With that, Renee, Charlie, and I are here to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was great. Appreciate you presenting. And Cherry, are there any questions or hands raised?
Yes, there is a hand raised from Miguel Vasquez. Just a reminder to everybody, when you are making a verbal comment, we ask that you note your affiliation, just so we all know where you're coming from. So Miguel, I'm going to unmute you. Miguel, you're self-muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. This is Miguel Vasquez from the County of Riverside Department of Public Health. My question is related to the number of, I guess, vehicles that would eventually be able to charge. And, you know, you may not have this answer, but it's just kind of floating in my head. Is there an estimate of, you know, the number of vehicles that you outline? What is the amount of emissions that would be saved once this infrastructure is in place? I don't know, by year 2035. I don't know if your study or, you know, this work takes that into consideration. I'm assuming that could be part of it, because, you know, there's a business case to saving emissions, or I mean reducing emissions in terms of health outcomes, especially in communities that are affected by air pollution generated by, you know, standard diesel burning vehicles. It's okay if you don't have you know, a clear answer. I know this is kind of big, but I'm just curious. Thank you.
So, sure, I think that's an excellent question, and I think your point is well noted, and it is why we are all here doing what we're doing, right? I think that you know, for us in our Clean Truck program and our we have a goal, I should have mentioned, to have zero emissions drayage trucks serving the Port of Long Beach. Port of Los Angeles is the same by 2035. And while that definitely climate is a big focus of that, our Clean Air Action Plan and really the focus behind what we do is to reduce port emissions, to reduce those health impacts that are happening on the community due to goods movement. So I think that your point's well taken, and that is why we are doing what we're doing. In terms of what that number of emissions is, I don't know it off the top of my head, but it is one we have. We do an emissions inventory every year that calculates the emissions from port drayage trucks. So if you take that number, again, I don't have it off the top of my head, and you turn it to zero, if everything's zero emissions, that would be at least for the last year what it would have been. But
Matt,
yep.
This is Charlie. I can also add to that we did take into account LCFS, low carbon fuel standard credits, which are directly tiable to emission reductions into the kind of the business model. So the more emissions you reduce, the more LCFS credits you get, the better the business case is for public charging. So, and the emissions reduction is substantial. It's a lot.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more questions or comments?
We do have a couple of hands raised, but we also only have 11 more minutes in the meeting. So, so for the commenters, just please keep that in mind. We have Jack Smymington with his hand raised. Jack, I'm going to unmute you.
Oh, hi. My name is Jack Symington. I'm with the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator. Question about the overnight charging, slow charging configuration that you guys looked at. Were there considerations for where the drivers would be parking their personal vehicles and charging overnight, or kind of how operationally leaving trucks on port property overnight would work for the carriers?
Charlie, do you want to answer that?
I can, or Renee, but we did look at that in depth. And one of the reasons, by the way, that overnight charging looked particularly compelling is that independent owner operators, I think somebody mentioned that early on in this webinar, needs to have a solution. And by having overnight charging, that's a place where they could charge. We would, and the overnight charging spots wouldn't necessarily be on port itself, but near port. We looked at many locations where that might happen. Needs to be more real estate for overnight charging than you would for opportunity charging. But we did look at that extensively. And the people could park their personal vehicles near there, and maybe, take their personal vehicles, use those to go to their place of residence, or and then come back in the morning and use the truck. So it's quite an involved process for overnight charging, but particularly compelling.
Thank you.
Oh, one other thing about overnight charging too is that it's great for short haul. So trucks that only need to drive, say, a couple 100 miles or less, it's like charging your EV at your house when you only drive 40 miles during the day. Same thing with overnight charging for a truck. So it's not meant necessarily for long haul, but for port traffic, short haul, 100 miles, a couple 100 miles, perfect.
Okay, I want to be respectful of the two other presenters that still have to present. So if there's one more hand, I'm going to allow that comment really quick, but then let's move on and let's not take any more comments until the end, because I want to make sure that they have a chance to present what they've prepared. So was there one more hand raised, Sherry?
Yes, we have Andrea Vidari. Andrea, I'm going to unmute you. Andrea?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, really quickly, my name is Andrea. I'm with an organization called the People's Collective for Environmental Justice. We're out of the Inland Empire. A lot of the families that we work with live along the corridors that we're talking about today. And so I wanted to just ask about the overnight charging and what the implications it might be on traffic, if all trucks might be going back to charge at a specific time, what that might do to will it influence traffic? And I guess, has there been any exploration of timing out different charges to maybe have a different influence on how traffic is going back and forth? Because as you guys know, from the Inland Empire to the ports, there's clear hours where there's so much congestion, and just wondering if charging might be able to time it out a little better and maybe alleviate some traffic concerns, or congestion concerns maybe is a better word. Thanks.
Well, do you mind if I step in really quick? I just want to, I will let Long Beach answer the first part of your question, but in terms of timing, the goods movement sector isn't like the normal transportation sector where you can kind of try to move around, because they're really driven by customer demand. So they really have to take their use case into consideration. They don't have a lot of flexibility when it comes to timing, because it's all about the time, and the more time they take to do anything, the more money they lose. So they don't really have a lot of flexibility when it comes to timing, is my understanding. And they also need to think about their schedule, because they can't just take time out of their day to stop whenever they want. They have to try to minimize their stops. And there's not fast charging that's really working right now. That's what the charging study is saying. So that's one reason why, and electricity is cheaper at night, why they're wanting to charge overnight like that, because it's using their time most efficiently, and the energy is generally cheaper then. But that's just a short answer in a layman's perspective. But I don't know if there's any comment you have, Port of Long Beach, on the overnight part.
No, I think that I don't have much to add other than just to remind everybody, our study was looking at probably a relatively small number of chargers like overnight within the Port of Long Beach. We don't think that it'll be, you know, the even close to a really significant amount of the charging that the region needs. But those are good things to think about when we are, as a region, are planning our charging.
One quick comment I can make is that we did look specifically at environmental justice issues. A lot of the independent owner operators park their trucks in the neighborhoods, and we thought if we could provide a solution for overnight charging where we could take those trucks out of the neighborhoods and not impact the local neighborhoods, that would be a major bonus.
Okay, because of time, because we only have 4 minutes left, I want to okay, so Nico and Mikkel, would you rather wait until our next work group meeting and cover your presentations then? I'm sorry to do this to you, but I thought we were going to be able to get through more today, but it's my fault, I put too much on our agenda. So do you have a preference?
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, this is Nico with the California Fuel Cell Partnership. I can do that, but I'd like to make a few quick comments about, as an introduction to what we will talk about next time. As folks may know, we published a vision document for 2035, and I'm trying to share the link, but as a panelist, I don't think I can share directly with the audience. So if one of you can post it in the Q&A box so folks can go to it. But that shows a map of what we propose for 2035 with regard to heavy duty hydrogen fueling stations. And there's also an interim step for 2025 for an infrastructure. And I agree with some of the comments made earlier. Infrastructure is most important, because if you want to get to any rollout numbers, you need to be able to sell these trucks or lease them out, and nobody will buy them if there's no infrastructure available. Truck operators will notice that. And also, our assumptions are rather significant with regard to the sizing of that infrastructure. It will facilitate hundreds of trucks, not just 10 or 20 compared. That's currently the case. But also with regard to public access, we've been there with light duty, and public access is not necessarily. I was assuming when the Port of Long Beach talked about public access that they meant publicly accessible to any truck operator, because there's obviously desire not to mix light duty with heavy duty. It results in very significant issues, including safety issues. So when I hear public accessible and accessible to all, I was assuming it was for trucks only and not for others. So just want to add that, and I've shared the. Oh, it looks like you've shared the link. So if folks can take a look at that on page 15 on the mapping. That's for 70,000 trucks by 2035, heavy-duty Class 8 trucks. And that's an approach that we're working right now on a roadmap on. So I'll leave it with that, and so you have some time, and maybe Mick wants to mention if he wants to comment now or later.
Yeah, I'll wait, and we can just do the hydrogen stuff. It looks like April 1st or something.
Yeah, so I think instead of canceling the April 1st meeting, I'll keep it, and then you guys can present, because I was gonna cancel that so that I would have time to look through the information that's due in the end of March. But let's just keep it, and then you guys will have a chance to present your slides, and I won't be ready to talk about the information I've received yet then, but at least we'll have time for that. Does that sound good?
Yeah, for time's sake, that sounds good. So we're most productive. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So that concludes our presentation for today. As I just stated, we will be having our April 1st meeting, and I'll be more mindful in the future of how many items I put on our agenda. I thank you all for your comments, and if you didn't get a chance to make a comment today and you wanted to, or if you have any follow-up questions, then please email me and I'll work with you to either note what you're recommending or just try to answer any questions you may have. Thank you all again and have a good weekend.